Today, its story is
Tooth Teacher. The fluorescent lights of the Tucson, Arizona State Lottery office hummed a lonely tune. Imani sat on a hard plastic chair, her gigantic afro slightly tilted as she stared at the floor. She was wearing a green sweater and black pants, feeling quite discouraged. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over her. It was a very tall man in a black t-shirt and matching pants. "Why the long face, little sister?" Shaq asked, his voice deep and rumbling. Imani sighed. "This place just feels so empty." Shaq smiled, a twinkle in his eye, and gestured for her to follow him. Shaq led Imani to the back of the building where a strange-looking elevator stood. It didn't look like the others. It had glowing coils and a complex keypad. "This is the DeLorean-style time machine elevator," Shaq explained with a wink. Imani's eyes widened as she stood before the glowing console. She reached out and carefully typed into the keypad, December 9th, 2014, AT 5:30 a.m. The doors hissed shut, and the floor began to vibrate with a sudden, brilliant flash of blue light. The elevator doors opened into a cozy apartment at 160S Avenida del Convento, App 210. It was early morning, and the room was beautifully decorated with tinsel and Christmas lights. Imani's mother, Patricia, stood in the kitchen in a bright orange dress, her own gigantic afro perfectly round. Her father, Jack, was nearby in a green t-shirt and red boots, checking his watch. "Time to get moving, Imani," Patricia called out. The smell of cinnamon pine filled the air as the family prepared for the day. Before getting dressed, Imani slipped into the bathroom for a quick wash. She leaned over the tub, surrounding herself with bubbles and shampoo to make sure her gigantic afro was as fresh as could be for the school day. The warm water felt wonderful, and she hummed a little holiday tune as she scrubbed. She knew it was a big day ahead at Flowing Wells High School, and she wanted everything to be perfect. After her hair was dried into its signature magnificent shape, Imani changed into her favorite outfit, a Barbie pink t-shirt and bright magenta pants. She walked back into the living room where Shaq was waiting with her father. Jack looked up and grinned, extending a hand to the tall man. "Good to see you, Shaq," Jack said warmly. They stood together, two tall figures under the twinkling Christmas tree lights, while Patricia finished packing a lunch for the day. The big yellow school bus pulled up to the curb with a hiss of brakes. Imani climbed aboard and found her friend Bradley already sitting in a middle seat. "Ready for the Christmas lesson?" Bradley asked, his own gigantic afro bouncing as the bus hit a bump. Imani sat down next to him, feeling a tiny, strange wiggle in her jaw. "I think so," she said, touching her cheek. "But I think my tooth is about to go on a holiday of its own." Further up the bus, Sarah and Susie were deep in conversation about their holiday plans. Susie, with her bright red hair and signature yellow headband, was holding a small toy ornament. Sarah leaned in close, listening to Susie's plan for the classroom decorations. The bus was filled with the excited chatter of students, all looking forward to the break, though Imani's mind kept wandering back to the loose tooth that felt more unstable with every pothole they hit. Near the back of the bus, Max and Stephanie were laughing loudly. Max was showing off a new festive sticker on his notebook, while Stephanie adjusted her backpack. They were the jokers of the group, and their laughter echoed through the aisles. Even with her tooth starting to throb, Imani couldn't help but smile at their antics. The energy on the bus was high as they finally pulled into the parking lot of Flowing Wells High School. As the students filed off the bus, Jasper Frost stood by the door, looking out at the school building. He adjusted his glasses and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. 12 days until Christmas, he remarked to Imani as she stepped down onto the pavement. Imani nodded, her hand still resting against her jaw. The school was decorated with paper snowflakes in the windows, welcoming them for the final lessons of the year. Inside the classroom, the atmosphere was festive. Paper snowflakes dangled from the ceiling, and the chalkboard was covered in drawings of reindeer. Miss Broderick, with her yellow-blonde curly hair and bright green earrings, stood at the front. She was wearing a matching green t-shirt and looked ready for a celebration. "Good morning, class," she announced, her voice full of cheer. "Today, we have a very special lesson about the history of holiday traditions." As the lesson began, Miss Broderick walked between the desks. She reached toward a tall stack of books, explaining how different cultures celebrate during the winter. Imani watched her teacher closely, but her own tooth was now pulsing with every word Miss Broderick spoke. "Is everyone following along?" Miss Broderick asked, turning back to the class. Imani raised her hand halfway, then winced as her jaw gave a sharp, sudden twinge of discomfort. Suddenly, disaster struck the teacher. Miss Broderick was mid-sentence when her face contorted. She let out a tiny, muffled oof and clapped a hand over her mouth. A small, white tooth flew from her lips and skittered across the floor like a runaway marble. Sarah, sitting in the front row, let out a loud gasp and pointed. "Miss Broderick, your tooth!" she cried. The teacher's eyes went wide as she realized what had just happened in front of the whole class. Despite the dental mishap, the class tried to move on. Susie and Max started a lively discussion about Santa Claus and his secret workshop. "Do you think he uses magic to keep his teeth in?" Max joked, trying to lighten the mood. Susie laughed, tossing her red hair over her shoulder. "I think he just eats a lot of soft cookies." They talked about the giant tree in the town square and the bright lights that lined the streets of Tucson. When the bell finally rang for lunch, the cafeteria was buzzing. The special of the day was spaghetti Alfredo, and the smell of garlic was everywhere. Susie sat across from Imani, watching as she gingerly poked at her noodles. "You have to eat, Imani," Susie encouraged. Imani shook her head slowly. "My tooth is so loose, Susie. If I bite into this spaghetti too hard, my whole jaw might just pop off." Back in the classroom after lunch, Miss Broderick was feeling a bit clumsy. She reached for a large globe on the shelf to point out the North Pole, but it slipped. Thump! The heavy globe hit her right in the mouth. "Ow!" she cried out, her voice muffled. She stumbled back, looking dazed, and accidentally bumped her face right into the edge of the classroom door. It was a sequence of events that left the whole class holding their breath in shock. Seeing her teacher in pain made Imani's own mouth throb in sympathy. "Ah!" she screamed, clutching her face. The pain in her jaw was reaching a peak. She stood up from her desk, her Barbie pink shirt bright against the classroom walls. "Are you okay, Imani?" Bradley asked from the next desk over. Imani couldn't even answer. She just held her jaw and looked at Miss Broderick, who was also clutching her face. It was a dental nightmare for everyone. When school finally ended, Imani took the long bus ride home, still feeling the ache. Her older sister, Francine, was waiting at the door. Francine looked glamorous in a white t-shirt and red pants, her orange earrings dangling. "Rough day at school, little sister?" Francine asked, leaning down to check on her. Imani just nodded sadly. "Miss Broderick lost a tooth, and now I think mine is going to be next," she whispered. "Don't you worry," a boisterous voice called out. It was Fat Grandpa, wearing his signature yellow t-shirt and black glasses. "We're going to cheer you up." To the octopus mobile, he led them outside to a bright green van with extra windows and strange gadgets on the roof. It looked like a professional racing vehicle, but painted the color of a lime. Grandpa hopped into the driver's seat with a huge grin, ready for an adventure. Imani hopped into the passenger seat, and Grandpa revved the engine. "Where are we going?" she asked as they peeled away from the curb. "To the grand opening of the Walmart Supercenter," Grandpa shouted over the engine's roar. "There's nothing like a new store to make you forget about a tooth." Imani strapped her seatbelt, watching the Tucson sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold as the octopus mobile sped down the road. They arrived at the Walmart Supercenter just as the grand opening festivities were in full swing. Right by the entrance stood Santa Claus, ringing a large golden bell. "Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!" he boomed, his red suit bright under the parking lot lights. He had a friendly face and a thick white beard. Imani looked up at him as they walked by, and Santa gave her a special wink that made her feel just a little bit better. Inside the store, the aisles were packed. Imani spotted her friends Stephanie and Sarah near the electronics section. They were looking at the new holiday displays and laughing. "Hey Imani, did you see the new decorations?" Stephanie called out. Sarah was still talking about the crazy events in the classroom. The store was filled with music and the smell of fresh popcorn, adding to the electric atmosphere of the grand opening night. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared near the produce section. It was Miss Broderick. She seemed to have found a rope hanging from a display and was somehow spinning around on it like a top. "Help! I can't stop," she cried out. She was a whirlwind of green t-shirt and blonde hair, spinning faster and faster as the shoppers stopped to stare. It was the most bizarre thing Imani had ever seen in a grocery store. As Miss Broderick spun, she accidentally swung too wide. Bump! She hit Sarah, who was just trying to look at the apples. "Whoa!" Sarah cried as she was knocked back into a pile of oranges. Miss Broderick finally let go of the rope and tumbled toward a bin of green apples. The chaos in the produce section was reaching its peak as the teacher tried to find her footing among the rolling fruit. Trying to compose herself, Miss Broderick grabbed a shiny green apple and took a massive, crunchy bite. Pop! A whole row of teeth flew right out of her mouth and landed on the floor. Miss Broderick froze, holding the apple, her mouth now completely empty. She looked at the shoppers around her with a shocked, toothless expression. The tooth teacher had finally lost the battle against the crunchy fruit, and the whole store went silent for a moment. Sarah gasped at the sight, and the shock of it all caused Imani's own loose tooth to finally pop right out. "We're twins," Imani giggled, holding her tiny tooth up for everyone to see. Miss Broderick laughed, a toothless laugh, and even Santa Claus joined in from the entrance. The tooth teacher had taught Imani the best lesson of all. Christmas is always full of surprises, and sometimes you just have to laugh when things fall out.
The end.